you should do this diet because, vegetarianism and, it's better for the environment because you're not using the high environmental footprint of mass animal production. You're not getting the toxins from the animals. You're not getting the saturated fats. And so there's all these great reasons to be, a vegetarian. Um, there's also arguments of why you should be paleo and how we need the animal protein, and but you want to do it grass fed and you want to do it locally sourced, and so there's arguments for all of it. And historically, again, I've always told patients, I was like, well, try each one out. Try it out, see how you feel. We'll test your markers. We'll, take what works and leave what doesn't. But again, with the genetics, now I can go, okay, well, as a vegetarian, you actually genetically have a really high need for B12. And as we know, vegetarians are prone to lower levels of B12 because we get B12 from animal products. And so if you're vegetarian, you're not getting that. So you need to supplement. So we already know that. But some people, even if they are consuming an animal based diet, they still need to supplement with B12 because they genetically have a higher need for B12. So somebody who decides to be a vegetarian, that's going to be a lot harder for them in those cases. And they may not, maybe that's not the right diet for them, genetically speaking, because they can't process those things very well. Or maybe meaning they just need more B12, so they aren't getting what they need to do daily processes, right? They just need to take lots of extra B12. And also, if they aren't somebody who can, in our body, we make proteins every day. So if they have genes where they can't appropriately turn proteins over or metabolize proteins very well on a cellular level where they're processing, they may need more animal meat to be able to supplement that protein. And everyone's a little bit different. I have vegetarian patients without even seeing their genetics who are my healthiest patients. And, their blood work is great. They're high energy. Their skin looks good. They're doing great. I have other patients who come in and they're vegetarian, and I can take one look at them and go, oh my God, you need to eat a cheeseburger. Like, this is not working for you, But again, we can see on that genetic level where they might actually need some extra nutrient support and therefore help guide them in what their body specifically needs dietarily wise.
That's interesting because I read a study preparing for this that 40% of us have genes linked to celiac disease. Okay, so again, food,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's our
yeah.
inability to process gluten, right? But so again, there's an issue about, but it doesn't express in a lot of us, even though we might have that genetic predisposition. So can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that? Because, it makes, is it tied to the same reason a vegetarian might not process B12 or iron the same way?
Not exactly. So, there's sort of two different things going on there. One is that like you said, 40% of us can carry the gene for celiac disease, which is okay, that's a lot of us. And but not all of us have the celiac disease, which is why, especially with celiac disease, I always advise patients to be careful. I'm like, you can do the genetic test. That doesn't diagnose you as celiac. If you have the HLB, whatever number that is, um, gene for celiacs, it doesn't mean you have celiac. It just means you have a genetic predisposition to it. So this comes back down to the concept of what we talk about all the time, where the DNA is not your destiny. It's just the blueprint, but how those genes are expressed can then change your outcome. So with somebody who's like a vegetarian, if they have a gene and remember from 2 weeks ago, we talked about what we refer to as genes and enzymes, right? So if you want, you can go back and rewatch that talk from 2 weeks ago. But the gene codes for the protein, and the protein is the enzyme that makes things go in the factory from, one product to the next product on the assembly lines, right? So if you have a gene that doesn't code correctly, and it is therefore, you can't absorb B12 very well, in the vegetarian's picture. Then you just need to supplement with some B12 because they may need that. But also there's the idea of how the DNA is going to be turned on and turned off. So maybe the vegetarian has this genetic tendency to be low on B12, but is that actually being expressed? Can we do other things to, turn that gene on or off, so to speak? So with the, tendency, if you carry the gene for a disease, is that going to be your life? It may or may not be. So there's nutrients that we need for the enzymes to be able to, for enzymes that aren't working, that maybe you need to supplement with, like the B12. But then there are nutrients that will affect how the DNA is expressed. So there's two different things here. So if you have a gene that doesn't make the B12, so you need to take the B12, but maybe you need B12 to change the expression of the genes themselves. So, for example, like the MTHFR that we talk about all the time provides us with methyl groups. Methyl groups specifically turn on and off genes in the DNA. So, if you're somebody who doesn't make methyl groups very well, maybe you need to supplement with them because it'll help better control the expression of your genes. But then that's just the tip of the iceberg with genetic expression. So just because you have the genes, again, doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. But we know that the environmental influence on how your body manages those genes is most of what's happening. We know that the toxic burden, unfortunately, that we have in our modern society. We know that nutrient deficiencies, we know that stress and oxidative stress and inflammation all will change how those genes are turned on and turned off as well too. So that's why you can carry a gene and not necessarily have it be an issue, but an unfavorable environment means you're more likely for that gene to become an issue. I hope that
Yeah,
answers that question.
that's what, when Dr. Jeff Bland talks about exposomics, that relates to that. It's the
Right.
environment, the pollution, the toxins, those types of things can affect it as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's a ton of research on exposomics. There's this new thing I was reading about called the cell danger response, which is absolutely fascinating. It talks about how we have this very primal, innate switch, essentially, where our mitochondria monitors the perceived danger in our environment, which is, stress. Low nutrient levels can be this danger risk, that can be a danger. A high level of toxic burden, even if it's not like, oh my God, I just got a huge dose of mercury. It's like a little bit of this chemical, a little bit of this chemical. And even if those chemicals aren't toxic per se, or maybe they aren't at toxic levels, but hundreds of them at once creates an environment where the mitochondria is the cell danger response is being triggered. And so that directly affects genetic expression, because now we need to be in survival mode and whatever we need to do to get by because we're in not a safe environment. So that's like the cell danger response, the exosomics. So there's all this research on how we know that the chemicals and toxins in our environment impact our genetic expression directly. So while we're not having, and this is way more impactful than like genetic mutations. It takes generations for mutations to occur in the genome that are significant, but it only takes, a small lifetime for the environmental toxins to change the expression of that genome. And so a lot of these theories about the cell danger response, the exosomics, are all talking about how we are changing our genetic expression because of the danger response and the environmental toxins that are impacting how we are functioning on a day-to-day level, which is crazy and scary, but also we know, we can mitigate that with, taking the appropriate nutrients, reducing the oxidative stress, reducing the toxins as much as we can in the world that we live in.
Well, and being more sensitive to our environment. I mean, so like even, making sure that we don't use, certain chemicals at home or in our
Yeah,
yard, or, in our sunscreens, in our skincare, and,
in
all
our
those other things that we
cookware.
don't think about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so what we do it, because I still love to occasionally go out and get a good burger and a beer, because who doesn't? But at home, we don't do that obviously all the time. But and if I'm going to go out to eat at a restaurant, it may not always be organic, because that's not, unfortunately, standard of food supply. So what we do in our house is, we only have we take our shoes off when we come in, so we're not tracking things. We use cleaning products. We only buy organic foods. I'm mindful of the makeup that I buy, and the hair products, and all those types of things, a laundry detergent. Just trying to mitigate the number of chemicals that are increasing the load. We still live in this world. It is what it is. So just have to sort of be reasonable with what we have, and control what we can, which is our home environment. And so I always encourage patients, all my patients, I always refer to the environmental working group, which I've mentioned on these talks before. Environmentalworkinggroup.org talks about what our chemical exposures are and how we can mitigate them through cookware and cleaning products, etc. So I always advise people on doing that, so that we can just mitigate some of those toxins at any point, as much as we can control in our life. It can't be everything, otherwise we live in a bubble on Mars. But otherwise we can, mitigate their response, in our home at least, right?
Yeah, great. Well, again, it's past our quitting time, but I just want to say thank you. So what I learned today was exposomics. So a lot of it has to do with our environment, which makes a lot of sense. And that it's really important to know your genetic predisposition, so you can personalize your health plan and your lifestyle plan with your physician. And so making sure that your physician really does understand genomics and nutrigenomics is important.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful tool. And just like we said, we know lowering toxic burden, we know improving your diet has a positive benefit on health. But when we can see your genes specifically, we can really dial in on, what type of diet, what type of nutrients. And some people are really poor detoxifiers. So that environmental burden is even more of a problem for them than somebody else. So we've got to really make sure we're giving them the nutrients specific to support those pathways and those genes. So it's really fun being able to really dig that in. And like we talked about before, your genes are not your destiny. DNA is not your destiny. We can change the expression, and optimize your wellness, with those simple things.
Well, thanks for educating us again, Doc. And until next week, enjoy. It's sunny. It's getting warm again.
January is finally coming. Yeah. Here in Southern California. I'm sorry for those of you who may be in colder places.
That's right. Yeah. We're going
nice
to have one of those Chamber of Commerce weekends. I'm looking forward to it. So
yes,
put on your sunscreen.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye,
nice
Doc.
to see you. We'll see you next week. Yep. Yeah.